Hi, welcome back to In the Big Inning, and my name is Bob, and I'm going to talk about the one defining moment of Jewish baseball history. If you ask anyone who's Jewish, even if they don't know a lot about baseball, they're going to tell you what was the one big thing, and that is Sandy Koufax not pitching in the World Series because it fell on Yom Kippur. So, there's a lot to unpack with this, and I figured this was worth a video all on its own because it was such a major event, and I could do 10 videos on Sandy Koufax and his career, and I probably will, but this was the one moment that stands out because it was an incredibly important moment for the Jewish community and for Jewish pride all across America. So let's talk about a few things. We're going to talk a little bit about where he was and the history with pitching on Yom Kippur. We'll talk about the World Series, and we'll talk a little bit about the aftermath before we then get into some of the cards and memorabilia. So first, 1965, Koufax's career is kind of divided into two halves. The first half of his career, he was not a superstar. That's about 55 to 60. The second half, 61 to 66, he was on an absolute tear. And we'll talk about that in another video. So 1965 really is the peak and the pinnacle of his career. He had just finished a month earlier his fourth no-hitter, which at that time was a record, only beaten later by Nolan Ryan. And that was also his only perfect game. So he really was at the top of his game. Now, not pitching in the World Series was not him being defiant in any way. It was actually already in his contract that he doesn't pitch on these games. So let's talk a little bit about history. Sandy Koufax was not the first Jewish player to refuse to play on Yom Kippur. There were many of them, and we're going to do a separate video just on Yom Kippur, but Hank Greenberg, the other Jewish Hall of Fame player, already had not played on Yom Kippur. Of course, it was not the World Series, but it was also a much more difficult time for Hank Greenberg because at that time, in the 1930s, Jews were being accepted into society not as readily as they were in the 1960s. So it was actually a much tougher decision for Greenberg in his light not to be able to do that. But there's a lot of Jewish players have had to deal with this dilemma, and so we'll talk about a lot of those when we talk about those players. But for Koufax, this was the only time it happened, coinciding with the World Series. And for those who don't know, if you're not aware, Yom Kippur can fall in September or it can fall in October. It just depends on the Hebrew calendar for that year. In fact, Koufax had played not on Yom Kippur, but coming right off of Yom Kippur in what we would call the breaking of the fast, because we fast on Yom Kippur. And he had pitched a couple of times in the breaking of the fast, so there's some thought he might have had to actually go and warm up beforehand during Yom Kippur. Just an amazing feat. In 1961, that's what happened. In 1961, he pitched on the eve of the breaking of the fast. So imagine him coming off of that, pitching. He pitched a complete 13-inning game. 205 pitches. Now you can't even compare that to pitchers today. Pitchers today, if they go 100 pitches, they usually get pulled out. But he pitched 205 pitches coming off of the fast of Yom Kippur in 1961. So, since then, he had it in his contract that he doesn't pitch on major Jewish holidays. And of course, this was not a conflict with the team because it was in there. And Walter O'Malley, the owner of the Dodgers, even said, there's no way that I would let him pitch on Yom Kippur. So the Dodgers were totally amenable to it. There was no conflict. In the newspapers of the day, it wasn't written up as a major event. It was just simply Drysdale will be pitching, Don Drysdale, another pitcher, will be pitching tonight. Koufax will wait till game 2 due to Yom Kippur. So, let's take a look at the World Series itself. Now, the World Series is 1965, and it was game 1 that Koufax was going to pitch, but that fell on Yom Kippur. Both teams, the Dodgers and the Twins, a year earlier had finished in 6th place in their respective leagues. So both teams were a surprise to be doing so incredibly well and make it to the World Series that year. And the World Series itself was incredible. No bullpens for any winning teams. All 7 games, and it went the full 7, were decided with, or the winners in all the games, pitch complete games. So that, again, is amazing. You would never leave a pitcher in for a complete game today at all, let alone all 7 of the winners. So some of the losing teams used bullpens, but all 7 games were complete games. So it was an amazing series. So Koufax, he doesn't pitch game 1, and Don Drysdale takes his spot. Don Drysdale gets totally beat up. He's down by a few runs early on, and Walter Austin, the manager, comes over to pull him out. And Drysdale says to him, "I'll bet you wish I were Jewish now too." So taken in stride, and Drysdale and Koufax were very close friends and did a lot of things together after this season too. So it was just a kind of funny remark. And I've heard different versions of that story. What I'm going to do is bring versions that I have had the most confirmation of. And that was what supposedly Drysdale said. Koufax comes back and he pitches game 2. He loses, and this could have been now, 4 years later, from the earlier time that he pitched, but he was coming off of the fast at Yom Kippur, and he does not pitch a great game. So today, you might have 5 or 6 pitchers, you need 4 days rest, 5 days rest, all of these things. Koufax comes back after losing game 2, and on 3 days rest, he pitches game 5. Now that already is incredible, that he's pitching 3 days later. He pitches a complete game, 4-hit shutout. That's already an incredible feat. But that's only the beginning. On 2 days rest, he pitches game 7. This is unheard of in baseball today. Nobody would ever pitch on 2 days rest. You just consider them ineligible. He pitches another complete game, 3-hit shutout. So after losing game 2, he wins. On 3 days rest, he comes back for game 5. And on 2 days rest, he comes back for game 7, pitches complete game shutouts for both of them, winning the World Series. So it was an amazing, amazing achievement. And let's take a look at what it meant, though, for the Jewish community. The Jewish community gained a whole new respect and pride for being Jewish. And seeing somebody as great as Koufax put his religion ahead of a baseball game meant a lot to all of us in the community. As I said, it wasn't a huge event outside of baseball, but for us, it really meant a lot. As a matter of fact, and there's lots of stories about it, the next great Jewish pitcher, Ken Holtzman and Sandy Koufax, it was the end of Koufax's career, the beginning of Ken Holtzman. They did meet once, and that was the following year in 1966. And Holtzman's mother was so impressed that she didn't know who she actually wanted to win the game when Holtzman played against Koufax, and she had asked for a draw. She was hoping that they would have a draw in the game, which, if you aren't aware with baseball, that's actually impossible. So it was funny, and it was very interesting. The Jewish community filled with a lot of pride. Now, let's take a look at some of the memorabilia that I have. I've got lots of Koufax memorabilia, but let's take some that surround this game in particular. So I went shopping for a ticket stub when I was at the National or on eBay. Ticket stubs for this game now are selling between $1,500 and $2,000 a piece, which obviously I was not wanting to be paying for a ticket stub in which it's probably the only ticket stub in which the person you're buying it for did not play in a game. It's very common in the collectibles market to say I want a ticket stub where my favorite player hit 2 home runs. But you don't usually ask for a ticket stub of a game where the person didn't play. So what I did settle on was this mug, which has the ticket stub from that game. And I thought that was a really cool item. I mean, it's just such a unique thing. Let's take a look at the second piece of memorabilia from that time period. This is a copy of the Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year for 1965, which Sandy Koufax won. He won all sorts of honors that year. And what I found interesting here was there was an 8-page interview with Koufax talking about all aspects of his career, even getting as deep into him being a smoker. And yes, he was a smoker. And doesn't mention at all not pitching on Yom Kippur. So it goes back to what I said before, that while not pitching on Yom Kippur was a defining moment for Jews in America, it didn't have a huge impact to the outside community. And the third item I have, which is just kind of cute, I have a Sandy Koufax autographed baseball, and it says to Bobby, very best wishes, Sandy Koufax. Now I have to admit it wasn't really made for me, and yes, I do go by the name Bobby quite a bit, but this just happened to find that, and a seller who I know through eBay, and I was able to get it from him. So one of my favorite cards that I picked up at the National was the 1959 Morel Meats card. So this is a really tough card to find. I actually bought it not at the National, but in my hotel, sitting on the carpet in the basement of my hotel. I didn't know. It's my first National, and I didn't realize that everybody brought cards to trade. So I went down. I had brought one card with me, which was a 58 mantle, and I was able to find this card that one guy had. Great guy. We worked out a deal for the 58 mantle and some cash because this card is very, very rare. This card has a PSA pop of 24. So I assume many of those are in private collections right now. To find one anywhere from 1959 is extremely difficult. As a matter of fact, it's the first one I've ever seen. There are 1960 and 61 Koufax cards with Morel Meats, and they are a little bit easier to find. So this one was an amazing find. You can tell that it is from 59. The 59 and the 61 have the same picture on the front, but their backs are different. Here you can see the back of the 59 Morel Meats card. So Morel Meats was a local Los Angeles company that produced a series of these cards for 3 years in a row. The cards were not packed right in with the meat. So at the time they were very popular. But Koufax, remember in 59, Koufax was not yet the player that he became in the next 6 years. So not a lot of people were as enthusiastic about the Koufax at that time. So that's why this is such a hard card to find. As I said, it has a PSA population of only 24. So they're just not around and not easy to find anywhere. Two very nice Koufax cards from that time period. You can see his 1965 card, which is really tough to find with excellent centering all the way around as well as good color. I love this card. Came out very well as far as the 65 Koufaxes go. You can also see one of his many leaders cards. So this obviously came from the 1966 top set, a rating of a 6.5 on that, which I really like. Again, nice colors, nice borders, really beautiful card. So that's it. I hope you found it interesting to learn a little bit about Sandy Koufax and the most important moment in Jewish baseball history, not pitching in the World Series in 1965. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again on In the Big Inning.